Hello everyone, my name is Olivia Paulsen and I am a student at Middlesex Community College. For my research, I reviewed the current literature on culture, consumerism, and advertising, and the relationship between them, as well as where they fit in the process of enculturating children in America. So first off, to answer the question of what is consumerism, behavioral scientists generally define a consumer as someone who has desires and preferences, and they seek ways to meet these desires and preferences by selecting and shopping for products and comparing product and brand alternatives. Compared to adults, young children are undergoing different stages of development and processing, and they're unable to distinguish commercialism from reality, and this makes them more vulnerable to advertising. So here is a model of stages of consumer behavior in children according to psychologist Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and his theory is largely used by social psychologists to illustrate active intellectual growth in children. So starting off with the first stage, sensory motor, this includes children ages 0 to 2, and this is when we start to see consumer preferences and desires emerge. And the second stage, the preoperational stage, this includes ages 2 to 7. At this age, children begin to negotiate with their parents to buy products from brands that they know from their peers or from commercials they've seen on TV. And children of this age are generally unaware of the persuasive intent behind advertisements. In the next stage, the concrete operational stage, which includes ages 7 to 12, children can differentiate between advertisements they like and dislike, and we also start to see the emerging influence of peers on consumer preferences. And in the last stage, this includes children ages 12 and up, and children at this stage can think critically about advertisements, but this doesn't mean that they are not then susceptible to marketing and the appeal of a product. And here we start to see peer influence gaining dominance over consumer behavior and brand loyalty. So, how do advertisers reach children? In 2018, $3.2 billion were spent on traditional advertising, which refers to television or print advertising. $900 million were spent on digital advertising in 2018. Many companies subscribe to the theory that the earlier a child becomes a loyal consumer, the longer the company will have influence over their preferences and desires. So brands manipulate the innocence and curiosity of children at especially vulnerable stages of cognitive development. And through these advertisements, children learn the values and norms of American culture, one of these values being consumerism. So now looking at consumer behavior in children, according to multiple studies over the past few decades, children have become increasingly more materialistic. And materialism is generally defined by the possessiveness of products and the viewing of products as a necessity to happiness. Compared to other factors like gender, income, and culture, exposure to television advertising is considered to be the largest contributor to materialism in children. And we see this as children often associate possession of material objects with happiness, with increased viewing of television advertisements influencing children. We see them begin to attempt to persuade their parents to purchase an advertised item, and they often feel aggressive or dissatisfied when these desires are denied. And relating to consumer behavior, children are also able to identify brands and their products strictly by their logos. According to a 1991 study conducted by the American Medical Association, more than half of children were able to identify each of the logos shown on the screen, with some logos like Disney being recognized by 92% of children. And children could correctly identify the brand's product as well. Most American adults would be able to recognize these logos, as they are generally targeted towards adults. However, you wouldn't consider preschool children to be able to identify most of these logos. Now, the study is outdated, but we can assume that these numbers would be even higher today with increased technology usage. Another aspect of culture taught through advertising are gender norms. A 2017 study conducted by the University of Southern California of 196 characters in commercials played on Nickelodeon revealed that 36.7% of lead characters were female and 36.4% of voiceover actors were female. As you can see with these percentages, there are discrepancies in representation in advertising. And we can also see this with commercials targeted towards children using different rhetoric with gendered toys. Advertising of products geared towards girls use words like magic, baby, and glitter, whereas products targeted towards boys use words like powerful, vehicle, and hero. Through this lack of representation and through gendered toys, commercials can teach children to conform to gender roles while reinforcing stereotypes about men and women. This graph here is adapted from the same 2017 study as before, and it demonstrates the race representation in children's commercials on Nickelodeon. As you can see by the percentages, there are large discrepancies in representation of race. White characters make up the majority of characters in children's commercials, whereas Latino and Indigenous characters are underrepresented in children's commercials. Looking at behavior, non-white characters were depicted in the same manner as white characters in these commercials, but Latino characters were more likely to wear jewelry than their white counterparts, and black characters were more likely to wear revealing clothing. Considering how certain races are underrepresented in commercials, we can begin to understand the impact that commercials have on children that do not see themselves in the commercials that they're watching. Looking at food habits taught through advertising, high-calorie, sugary food and beverage advertisements have been linked to higher risk of obesity in children. Advertisements selling high-calorie food and beverages influence the diet and consumer behavior of families and thus their children. Unhealthy food advertisements disproportionately impact Hispanic and Black populations in the U.S. In a 2017 study, 86% of ads spent on Black targeted television programming were selling unhealthy foods. The same goes for Spanish language programming, where 82% of ads were unhealthy food advertisements. In the same 2017 study, Black teenagers saw twice as many ads for unhealthy food products than white teens. So even with food habits, there are discrepancies in race. So how has advertising evolved with the internet? Unlike print or television ads, new technology and algorithms powered by personal data are more integrated into content and therefore less obvious to younger consumers. Data collection includes location, likes and dislikes, and in-app behavior. Embedded advertising is common among celebrity influencers and social media in general. Sponsored user-created content is less likely to be identified by children. With gaming, there are new marketing practices like gamified advertising, which rewards users for watching ads or buying products. These apps are generally marked as educational and free to download, but they have in-app purchases which pressure children to either watch advertisements or pay. And children often can't distinguish the game from the advertisement in these scenarios. So, what is the impact, and why should we care? It is generally understood that socialization occurs through parents and peers, but marketers now have increased influence over a child's behavior and in teaching the norms and values of American culture. In a survey of 1,000 parents nationwide, more than 75% report that their child uses technology on a daily basis for up to 2 hours. Marketers directly target children who are unable to think critically by appealing to their emotions and desires, in turn teaching consumer behavior. Studies of American children have found that consumerism correlates with lowered self-esteem and reduced happiness in 8 to 18-year-olds. And companies like YouTube and Facebook generate profits through advertising, so it is unlikely that it will stop anytime soon. In response to advertising, there has been several legislation passed in countries around the world, and in the U.S., the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, protects children under the age of 13 from data collection and targeted advertising on children's sites. However, it does not ban predatory advertising, which refers to advertisers manipulating the vulnerability of a certain population with the intention of exploiting or harming them, and it also doesn't apply to non-children's sites like social media. Despite age limits on social media, children do download and use social media sites. However, these sites are not protected when it comes to children below the age of 13. With the flaws of COPPA, there is a gap in legislation protecting children from the harms of advertising. Based on the findings of my research, it's clear that children at younger ages than ever before are inundated with advertising and the influence of marketers that advertising has become a part of the enculturation process in America and the teaching of consumer behavior, food habits, and race and gender norms. Thank you.